The name on my mother's death certificate was a lie. The name carved into her headstone was a lie. For 20 years, I believed I knew the woman who raised me. Then, while sorting through her belongings, my fingers brushed against a hidden compartment in her old jewelry box. The scent of old paper and lavender gave way to something else. The sharp, metallic tang of ozone, like the air before a lightning strike. Inside rested a single, yellowed photograph, its edges brittle to the touch. When I turned it over, the breath froze in my lungs. The woman staring back was my mother, but she was standing in front of a house that burned to the ground 15 years before I was born. For 32 years, I called her Mom, but her real name was waiting on a database. The discovery landed like a physical blow, leaving me breathless and disoriented in my own kitchen. The familiar scent of home coffee and old wood suddenly felt foreign, tainted by the metallic tang of this new truth. Every cherished memory of her now pulsed with a strange, unsettling energy, as if I'd been living inside a story someone else wrote. This was my mother, Eleanor. She was a librarian, quiet, organized, the type of person who alphabetized her spice rack. Her life was a symphony of order, every book in its place, every moment accounted for. But in the weeks before she vanished, a subtle metallic scent began clinging to her clothes. The faint, coppery tang of old books and something else, sharp like ozone. It was the first quiet note of the dissonance to come, a sensory detail out of place in her meticulously curated world. My father, John, taught high school history in Dayton. From the outside, we were the perfect suburban family. Everything was stable, predictable, and utterly ordinary. Maybe even a little boring. The faded home videos show a birthday party, then Christmas morning, all bathed in a warm, nostalgic glow. Sarah's voice cuts through the memory, quiet and final. Mom died 2 years ago, ovarian cancer. Her next words land with a hollow word. It was fast, devastating. My dad, he just shriveled away. He had adored her completely. While sorting through her possessions, I uncovered only mundane items. Yet, the air in the room grew thick and stale, carrying a faint, metallic scent. Each ordinary object I touched felt unnervingly cold and slick to the touch. Her life was a collection of gentle habits, recipe cards, bookmarks, and quiet routines. And her documents, birth certificate, social security, death certificate, all perfectly in order. Eleanor Marie Miller. But grief has a way of warping reality. 6 months ago, on a desolate winter night, I spit into a sterile tube. It was one of those DNA kits, a Christmas gift from a friend. For your health history, she'd said, her words hanging in the cold air. The faint scent of ozone lingered in the room as I sealed the sample. Outside, the wind whispered through barren branches, a sound like distant scratching. My breath fogged the cold glass when I placed the tube on the counter. The sticky residue on my lips tasted faintly of salt and something metallic. That simple act in the quiet darkness felt heavier than I could explain. A primal unease settled deep in my gut as I walked away. My mother's cancer diagnosis had left me unsettled, so I sent my DNA sample away for analysis, then promptly forgot about it. On an ordinary Tuesday, the email arrived. The air in my office suddenly felt dense and stale, carrying the faint scent of ozone and old paper. My fingers hovered over the mouse, paralyzed by a primal dread of what I might discover. Your results are ready. The words glowed on the screen. I clicked, my curiosity a dull ember. The ethnicity pie chart appeared, mostly British and Irish, with a faint Scandinavian sliver. I shrugged. Fine. Then, my finger moved almost of its own accord, clicking the tab labeled DNA Matches. The DNA match list glowed on her screen. At the top, Michael Donnelly. Predicted? First cousin. Sarah's hands went still. A sour, metallic taste filled her mouth. She whispered, I didn't have a first cousin named Michael. My mother was an only child. My father always spoke of his sister, but her children were named Lisa and Brian. I stared at the name on the old family registry. A metallic, coppery scent seemed to rise from the page as I traced the ink with my finger. The letters felt unnaturally cold and slightly tacky to the touch. A glitch in reality. It had to be. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out the distant sound of a single, persistent water drip. The air itself grew dense and still, holding its breath alongside me as the impossible truth settled in my bones. Sarah typed the message, her fingers trembling slightly. Hi Michael, our match is really high. I'm Sarah Miller. My mother was Eleanor Miller from Ohio. How are we connected? The cursor blinked once before she hit send. A metallic scent, like old coins, seemed to fill the room. Then, 3 dots appear on her screen. His reply was instant. Hi Sarah, that's wild. The next words materialized, carrying a weight that thickened the air around him. Right before I was born. The final sentence hung in the digital silence, a cold fact that smelled faintly of old paper and unanswered questions. The family had always wondered. Maybe you're connected through her? My breath seized in my throat. Missing. I typed back, my fingers clumsy and numb. What was her full name? The 3 dots blinked. An eternity passed in that silence. Austin, Texas, 1988. Linda Carol Donnelly simply vanished. The humid Texas air carried the scent of ozone and distant, forgotten rock. One moment she was there, the next, Only the echo of a name remained. My parents met at college in Ohio back in 1985. They never once lived in Texas. I tried to dismiss it as just a coincidence, a simple database error. But the explanation felt hollow. A flimsy cover for a deeper, unsettling truth. A primal dread took hold, whispering that the past itself was not what it seemed. But that night, I dug deep. On a paid people search site, my cursor hovered over the search button for Eleanor Marie Miller, born 1965. The air in the room grew thick and stale, smelling faintly of dust and old electronics. My breath hitched as the only sound became the faint hum of the computer and the rapid thrum of my own pulse in my ears. A sticky dread settled over me. I clicked. The mouse clicked with finality. Sarah's breath hitched as she scanned the results. Nothing. No records existed before 1989, the year her parents married. It was as if this woman was simply born at 24.
I chose a quiet morning to approach my father, broaching the subject over steaming coffee. "Dad," I asked gently, "did Mom ever mention living somewhere else before you met?" The coffee's rich aroma suddenly felt heavy in the air as his eyes met mine. Something unspoken passed between us, a recognition that I had touched upon a truth he'd long buried. He set the mug down with deliberate slowness. John's voice was measured, almost too calm. "Why would you ask that, sweetheart?" Sarah replied, "I just found some old things." A postcard with a Texas stamp. The air in the room grew thick and stale. John became utterly motionless. "Your mother
Had a difficult youth.
She left it behind." His words carried the scent of old dust and forgotten secrets. We swore we'd never unearth it.
That's why she cherished our quiet life so deeply. Please, Sarah, honor that pact. Sarah's response carried no denial. It was a deflection. But the name, Linda Donnelly, seared itself into my consciousness. I couldn't stop myself. An overwhelming compulsion drove me to a newspaper archive. The air inside smelled of decaying paper and dust, clinging to my skin. A faint scratching sound echoed from somewhere in the stacks. But I kept searching. The microfiche reader whirred to life in the archive's stale air, its greenish glow illuminating a 1988 headline from the Austin American-Statesman. My search for Donnelly, missing, had yielded this single, haunting result. And there she was, a face I knew intimately, yet had never seen. A young woman, with my mother's eyes. My mother's smile, but harder. A life lived in different lines. Linda Carol Donnelly. The article said she was a waitress, last seen after a shift. The air thick with the scent of grease and ozone. She was suspected of involvement with a man tied to a minor fraud operation. She wasn't a crime victim, but someone who might have known dangerous secrets. Then she vanished without a trace. The air in her apartment carried the faint metallic tang of fear. Sarah. I scrolled through the messages late that night, my fingers trembling against the cold glass screen. Each tap revealed another layer of the deception, the sticky dread of realization settling in my chest. 3 months later, a small follow-up article appeared. Donnelly case grows cold. The lead detective was quoted saying, "It's like she evaporated, or became someone else." Then, in a whisper that seemed to seep from the shadows themselves, a voice responded.
"Sarah, she did. She became Eleanor, meeting my kind, gentle father in a new state where they built a fortress of normalcy." I flew to Austin, compelled by a gnawing unease that clung to my thoughts like damp clothes. The air in the terminal carried the faint, metallic scent of ozone and distant rain. I had to meet Michael, the man who knew the truth behind Eleanor's transformation.
In that Austin coffee shop, Sarah faced a man with her chin, her brow, a living distortion of her own reflection. The air carried the faint scent of burnt coffee, and something metallic, like old pennies. Her voice dropped to a whisper, the words hanging in the heavy space between them. "We shared 18% of our DNA," she said, the revelation settling like a physical weight in the room. He showed me photos that smelled faintly of old paper and attic dust. His mother, my mother's sister, faces I'd never seen, yet whose eyes felt hauntingly familiar. My grandmother stared back with a gaze that made the air feel thick and heavy. A family I never knew, now whispering from the silence of forgotten frames. The family grieved their daughter, who had chosen to die to them so she could live. Years passed, marked only by the heavy scent of damp paper and a phantom touch of absence. Then, one letter arrived. Postmarked, Ohio, 1989. It contained just 2 words, spoken by Michael in a voice thick with unresolved sorrow. "I'm safe." Sarah held the photocopy, the handwriting unmistakably her mother's. The words, "I'm happy, don't look for me, I'm sorry," seemed to bleed from the page. My grandmother had kept this secret until her death, its paper now brittle with age and something heavier. A cold, metallic scent clung to the air as the truth began to coil in the room's stillness. The voice was a stranger's, unfamiliar, yet carrying the weight of a confession. Sarah. I returned to Ohio, the journey home feeling heavier than the miles traveled. I went to my dad, not with questions, but with a statement. The kind that hangs in the air like ozone before a storm. I placed the photo of Linda Donnelly on the kitchen table, the laminate surface cool and slick beneath my trembling fingers. He didn't weep, he simply collapsed. as though the final ember of his will had been extinguished. I loved her, he breathed out, the words barely audible. From the very first moment we met, she carried it with her. A long pause filled the room, thick with the scent of damp earth and old regret. This profound, consuming dread. She vanished like a startled bird, her sudden absence hanging in the air for a full, silent year before she returned with her story. When she finally spoke, her voice was a dry whisper, laced with a metallic scent of fear. She was in deep, suffocating trouble, not with the law, but with shadows that held a far more visceral and dangerous intent. She needed a fresh beginning, and I facilitated the paperwork. I gave her my name, John. His voice thick with emotion, would later confess. She wasn't running from a life, Sarah. She was running to one. To us, she was Eleanor, the woman she truly was deep down. Linda was just the costume she had to wear to survive. The air grows heavy with the scent of old paper and ozone. So who was my mother? Was she the beloved librarian everyone trusted? Or the terrified waitress from Texas, her hands trembling as she poured coffee? Did she weave elaborate lies that ensnared an entire town? Or was she the lone survivor, carrying a truth so heavy it reeked of ozone and old rock? I don't visit the grave marked Eleanor anymore. I visit the quiet, fierce woman who loved me enough to bury her entire past. The scent of wet soil and decay hangs heavy in the air, clinging to my clothes like a secret. She chose a simple, loving lie over a complicated, dangerous truth. Sarah held the aged photograph of Linda beside the recent one of Eleanor. The air grew heavy with the scent of old paper and decay. Her breath hitched as the same eyes looked out from both portraits, separated by decades. Sarah turned to the camera, her voice thick with emotion. We all have names given to us. Some are on birth certificates, some are on death certificates. But the name we choose for ourselves, that's the one that truly defines us. My mother chose Mom, a title of love, of warmth, of home. That word alone held all the meaning that ever mattered to me. Yet, in the quiet moments, a cold whisper of doubt still stirs, and I find myself wondering about Linda, and I hope she's finally at peace too. The air suddenly thickened with the scent of damp earth and ozone, like the moment before a storm breaks. A low, rhythmic scratching began, not from the door, but from the very walls themselves. Then, absolute stillness. The final, merciful darkness.